Hi, everyone, and welcome to a Mind Pod. In this week's episode, um, the title of the episode is At Peace with Addiction. And today, I'm really excited and pleased to have with me Harry Dabritsky. Now, just a little personal introduction, and then I'm sure Harry will Harry has. I could actually sit and listen to Harry for hours and hours, and his stories of time spent with Sid. But I met Harry on Heartfelt Presence, which is a Zoom room that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with kind of coaches from all over the globe where people can access the heartfelt space. And there's always a coach in that room, sharing the principles and sharing what they've seen, and it's a really beautiful space. And I met Harry there, and I will always be grateful to you, Harry, because I'm not a particularly, I don't know, Harry might say differently, but I'm not a particularly loud and brash person. I'm not one of those people that kind of pushes themselves out. I would much rather sort of hide behind a bush and just like do my own thing, do my kind of thing. And Harry has really encouraged me to come out from behind the bush and share more and try more. And he's invited me to be part of a group, which is just the biggest blessing ever. And we'll speak a little bit about the group, I'm sure. So, so Harry, I'm just so grateful that we met because it's been amazing, and um, yeah, I'm just so grateful, really grateful. I know you know that, but just wanted to like make sure that you really know that. So, just to start with, Harry, today, I know that you have done a lot of work, amazing work with addiction. And I know you've got a book coming out. And I was just wondering whether, just to start off, whether you would mind sharing an interaction that you had with somebody that was struggling with addiction and what it was that you shared, or where change came for them. And I know you've been involved in lots of different projects. Can you think of kind of um, anything in particular, like a client case, or a story that I just think that would be really helpful for anyone that is struggling with addiction, to hear how interacting with you really changed everything for them.
Right. Well, first, first, let's look at at what I do that might be a little bit different than they're used to. Uh, it's very uh, interesting for me to talk to people who have been addicted and then point them to a beautiful feeling inside of themselves. So if they have had the three principles, then there's a feeling of hope, and they already know a lot about thought. So, but they don't know much about the spiritual reality, and they have a very heavy feeling. So the first thing you notice with people who with addiction is they it's a heavy topic, and
Yeah.
they treat it as a heavy topic. And
Mm.
I'm saying it's a heavy topic, but let's not treat it as a heavy topic. Let's have a light feeling within yourself, because without this light feeling inside of yourself, you're not going to head towards where healing is. Now, where healing is not in the form. So there's nothing that they can do mentally and so on, or that I teach anyway. They have to go to the formless, to the silence before form is created. And that's the only place where there's healing. So I don't actually do anything with people. I just take them we walk, I call, with the word that we have used, we dance.
Yeah.
And, and that at a certain point, the music is heard. Because, you go on the dance floor and you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, and you think, when's my body going to start moving? And then at a certain point, you hear the music, and then before you know it, your body is moving. It's very similar to that. And then they step into that feeling. And 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 when they catch that feeling, they automatically have a smile on their face and lighten up. But here's the interesting point. Did they bring themselves along for the experience? That's the key point in what you're trying to show. If they have a good feeling, which is taught in 3 principles, that's the healing power. It is. But if they don't bring themselves along and actually see what has been experiencing, they just have a good feeling, like a party. Oh, this feels good. They still don't grasp the understanding that's required for them to see that that feeling came from them. So that's a process that you're working through. And in addiction, it's I was just thinking about it. When you have someone at the beginning of the addiction recuperation or recovery cycle, totally different than when somebody has gone through 80% of the recovery already, and now they just need the last 20% of the scenario. It's the same scenario, because if you're stuck no matter where you are in the process. But it's a different dynamic. So I'm going to give you 2 dynamics.
Cool.
One with a client that was more at the beginning, and one with a client who I'm working with right now, who's already covered 80% of the recovery process himself, still taking methadone from heroin, etc., but already has seen things. So the first one doesn't see much. They don't see what is false. They don't see what is true. The second one understands what is false and has a sense of what is true. And so that's a 2 totally different things. So the first one, I was thinking of this guy, he likes fentanyl, which is a very heavy street drug, and so on. And so he would never hear anything. He'd say they're always going to say, I got it. I'm never going to do it again. Because they have a good feeling.
Yeah.
And we're sharing, and people with me, they say, well, actually, it's not really therapy or counseling. It's more like playing.
Yeah.
And that's probably why I'm in the addiction field, Nikki, is because I'm light. I'm not a guy. I don't like being heavy, and I don't approach life from that perspective. And so that's my style. That's who I am. And so you talk and you go through, and they say, I've got it, and they might listen to a tape by Sydney Banks or something like that, and they say that guy was cool and all this, but they haven't internalized it. And so they relapse. And so this guy, every time he relapsed, it was the only time he listened. See, it shocked him that he was actually bullshitting, or excuse the expression, himself. And he came in humble. He had lost his cell phone. He had ended up in jail. He was on the street, et cetera, et cetera. And so he listened. And then we would go as deep as we could go. And then he would get that good feeling again. And then he would stop listening, but believe that he was listening type of, and he'd do it 3 or 4 times. So I want to talk about this process of relapse because he relapsed 3 times, which in my approach to things is, so what? It's like a 0. I fall down and make mistakes all the time. Every day. I don't beat myself up on it. And if I do, it doesn't help, except make it last longer. So there, he immediately thought, oh, I've got no churchy you should do this. This is a lesson. And if you don't use your willpower, you're going to be, you know. So there was not it was the opposite. My job was to get him off feeling lousy about himself, that he was feeling guilty. And so we would get a lift. And as I mentioned, that's the only time he was listening. And so he listened, and then he'd relapse, and then he'd go in, and then he'd listen again, and then he. So he took a certain amount of what I was sharing with him, and then he had enough. And I went, that's a spiritual journey. That's the way. That's it. And of course, it really helped him tremendously, because I'm not teaching him to get off addiction. I'm teaching him to be happy and content and to be a better human being. He wants to experience his potential. So that's what I'm talking to. I'm talking to that. It's not my job to tell people when they should get off addiction. Everybody knows addiction is, it can be like that or piece by piece. Mm-hmm. My co-host on Addiction, Alcoholism, and Three Principles, we met very similarly to you, Nikki. Very similar. We just met and it took off. I saw what an incredible level of consciousness. You had just had a fresh insight. I says, I got to work with this lady and maybe help her a little bit, temper her a little bit, but she's really got a beautiful potential, and she's knocking my socks off with this powerful insight, and she's sharing it in such a powerful way. And the same thing happened with my co-host, Greg Suki. We got together on Zoom. I'll make it real short story. And we really, both of us were determined that it would be 5-minute talk at the most. Like probably maybe when I came on and you saw it, well, nice Harry, but I've got to talk to my people. And then you saw what happened. Exactly the same thing. And so he thought I was on the make for money, which it was absolutely. And I thought I was going to, there was a question that some expert in 3P had answered, except they didn't answer it. But again, in 3P, you can say anything, and a lot of people will just go, oh, fantastic. You know, I just hate that. I just hate that. Fantastic what? She didn't even answer the question. you know, and so that was our purpose. And then, boom, he told me about his insight. I said, it didn't sound anything like mine, but I said, gee, that's as deep as the one I had on Salt Spring. And I said, that was that soul to soul connection. See, that's what you're looking for in addiction. Soul to soul connection. That's all that helps people. All the rest of it is a waste of time. It's just a bunch of words. It's that connection. And when they connect into that space, that us space where we both are there, then that's healing. And where the healing comes is formless. It's God's design. It's not Harry's design. I don't have an objective here. You know, so we got together, and he had an insight in AA that in 1 second, he dropped his total 100% urge to drink. And he was a heavy alcoholic like that. And he hadn't been in 3P yet, but what happened was 12 months later, he bumped into 3P and he says, oh, there's a language to describe my insight, what I have experienced. And then he took to it. And then we started a show, Addiction, Alcoholism, and Three Principles, a guy who knew nothing about addiction, but I was now working in a recovery center, and a guy who was an expert on addiction, but I was teaching the spiritual nature of thought. He was teaching, he was the subject matter expert. And then he exposed me. So what I'm teaching you about relapse is what I learned from him. See, if you talk to the best person in the world about a subject, you just go, you don't have to go through all that other stuff. You just go, shh, You see, there was an advantage being a virgin.
Yeah.
It was like, you don't know, but you're interested to know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so
So,
that,
Harry, what I personally I love to hear you talk about, and I'd love it if you could share. Now, I know that you knew Sid really well, and I don't get to speak to people that knew Sid, and so whenever I do, it's fascinating, and I always think what a blessing it was for you to have known him. As this episode is about addiction, can you think of times when Sid talked about addiction? Because I'm
well,
pretty.
he talked about it once. And uh, and what was interesting, he hardly ever, he talked about it, but he talked about, you see, Sid's talking about the spiritual nature of thought. And in the spiritual nature of thought, that's different than the psychological approach to thought.
Mhm.
It really implies the psychological is taken care of because you're in that space and you just kind of self-navigate to
Yeah,
where
yeah,
where you
yeah.
go, type of thing. So that was primary. So he talked about that. Now I put out in our a podcast series and also in our Addiction, Alcoholism, and Three Principles YouTube channel, his talk on that particular thing. But I remember it as a longer talk, and basically he I don't even remember him mentioning addiction or alcoholism because he was just talking about healing.
Yeah.
And so a professor or something, some kind of guy got up and says, "Well, don't you want them to get off alcohol?" And he says, "Well, of course. What have I been talking about?" You know, but he never mentioned that was because he was
Yeah.
just talking about changing thought. Now, when people hear that, they think it's like picking apples or oranges or my willpower. Dr. Amy Johnson, who's a psychologist and quite different than I am, but I like working with her because she defines things really well and she's very acute in understanding what's on the mind of people and she deals with it. Well, she's a psychologist. I don't do that type of stuff, and uh, so she had in her book a no willpower approach to whatever it is.
Yeah.
I have I have felt that has been a powerful teaching tool for me because it clearly explains the difference between mental I can't I have a choice and changing thought, which is the connection to the totality of the oneness and how it all works as part of the sharing of love, sharing of the spiritual universe process. So Sid's talking on a spiritual level of changing thought, principle of thought, versus the way people are
Mm-hmm.
hearing it. You can't tell me that if you don't change if God sends you a message and you accept it, decide to change away from your mental thinking into a spiritual direction within, coming from inside and out, you're not going to experience a healing process. And if you see that's consciousness. That's the problem people have in addiction is they're used to partying. They're used to getting, they're used to, everything is geared to release of the urge or the stress. But the reality of it is that they're actually changing thought.
Yeah.
But they're using the drug, and it's like going on vacation. Are you going to bring yourself along, or are you going to just have a good time when the vacation is good? The reality of it is that you can have a good time no matter what you're doing on vacation. But as you relax and as you get into, and that's why in Hawaii they say it takes 3 days for you to stop dropping your eggs, which means you get out of your head, type of thing. And to the, when you see people, they arrive in Hawaii, they're walking on the beach, and they're looking around, and everybody's, my bathing suit's half falling off, and I'm just sort of walking like this, and they're looking around, and they just don't get it. And then you see the person in 3 days, his bathing suit half falling off. It's like that, changing thought. What happened? It was at Hawaii? No, the person changed within. They
You
got
see,
it.
I think that's for people listening, that will be so something new that they probably haven't had, and also so refreshing. You know what your approach and Sid's approach is. So when you were talking about what you do and saying, I don't really talk about the addiction
No,
because
I,
I'm not interested. And what you just described there about Sid talking about giving a presentation about addiction, but not actually talking about addiction, because kind of like, to me, it sort of almost looks like if we're dealing with the addiction, it's too late. Like it's in the form.
that's exactly what he says. It's in the form, and the answer is in the formless.
Yeah. So
And
all
so
of the
that's
yeah, like all of the traditional kind of psychological approaches to addiction are, well, in actual fact, I believe that you can apply that to any mental health diagnosis, actually, in any psychological approaches. You're dealing with the form, and it's too late. you need to you need to go back. You need to go back. Not back in time, but you've got to go into the formless
it's
to.
the only place. See, that's why the psychological model has an inherent weakness in it,
Mm.
as because it's a spiritual psychology, and the spiritual is encompasses the psychological. It's part of. There's no difference between the two on one level, but until you see that, there is a big difference because you're working at here. I worked after everybody went on Salt Spring to the psychological direction. I said, that's not for me. So I went in the indigenous direction. I followed where I had to go. And I obviously, working in the indigenous world, there was a lot of drugs and alcohol. It's an inherent scenario there. Now, there was nothing, there were things I didn't understand. So I want people to understand, just because you have an insight doesn't mean you're a pro at everything you're talking about. And if you got a big ego, I had a very big ego. And most people say, well, it hasn't changed that much, but the scenario is I had a lot of things a lot of beliefs, a lot of stuff that I had to work through. So when I was working with people in the indigenous world, I was hopeless at addiction, hopeless. And so when I had sort of taken a relaxation of mind type of thing, I won't go through that. I then got offered at age 69. Now we're talking 27, 69, quite a gap between all the, and I got offered to work in this recovery center just an hour and a half a week, not, but, and I said to myself, well, this is the area I'm the worst in, let alone, but was now in a different place. So when I went in and talked to the people, first thing I noticed was the reason I was unsuccessful is what you are stating, Nikki. I was trying to fix them. I would get into the description of the problem and try and make that better. They felt guilty, so we would talk, and all this stuff. All of a sudden, so low mood stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went in with no preconceived idea, really thinking, well, I probably won't do this project because I don't like addiction, but I loved it. And the difference was I wasn't talking. It was just, I was talking. The people First of all, addiction, guaranteed to be spiritual more than ordinary people. They have suffered. They have taken drugs. They have looking for an answer, and there is no answer. And they're looking in the spiritual understanding of life. So, they have a inherent advantage over people who haven't suffered to the degree that they have. You want to grow spiritually, suffer, but it's not recommended for a good, easy, easy life. I don't like it, so I don't want to do it all the time. Type of thing. So that was interesting. The other thing was, it was so heavy, as I mentioned, the jokes really were well received, and you know me, I do like to have one or two of those, and I just then here is a guy who was emerging from his old skin, letting that loose. But the problem in the world is nobody listens. Nobody listens. Everybody's an authority on everything. And even though they say they're not listening, it's like a person, you take them through a feeling, they don't see it. They just go through the feeling. They don't take the good stuff. They just take, oh, that was a good party. I feel better for 20 minutes. I thought you were here for a little longer than that. And so the thing I noticed was they really wanted an answer. They knew the bullshit. You see, that's part of the process of healing in addiction, healing in mental health, healing in anxiety, healing in fun. You have to know what's false.
Yeah.
AA does not work for most people. AA is teaching a disease model. We are teaching a health model. They talk a lot about ego thought and really into it. And we're talking about spiritual nature of thought. It's a whole different type of flavor and stuff like that. And I thought, well, 3 principles, they're going to like puke on it. That's what I thought, but they actually were, oh, it's fresh and new.
Yeah, well, Harry, it's light and light-hearted. That's for me, in my introduction, that and you saying about the truth. The first thing I heard truth. I didn't understand a word the person was saying, but I heard truth. And it felt like I felt like the weight of the world had been lifted off my shoulders. It felt like light-hearted, hopeful. That's it. And people just, you come from that space, and then people kind of like I was wide-eyed. It's like you say, it's new and it's fresh, and then there's the soul-to-soul connection.
Sorry?
And from that, from that seeing and hearing truth and hearing something that's new and fresh, you then, they connected with you.
Of course. That's the whole idea. See, it's not really psychology, it's original psychology. And original means it comes from the moment it's fresh and new.
Yeah.
And that's what we're not teaching a book. We're not teaching the 3 principles verbalage. We're teaching what we're living, what we're experiencing, what we're seeing. And we notice that if we share a genuine insight with people, like you shared with me, it pulled me in. I went, oh, far out. This is good stuff, the good stuff. Everybody knows the good stuff. It's called love. It's love. And who doesn't want more love?
Yeah.
Everybody wants more love, that unlimited love that you have inside of you, that unlimited potential, total freedom. That's what I teach in addiction, not partial and this and that, and it's a big, long process. Total freedom, because that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want to be totally free of my own bad habits. Do I have bad habits? Well, it turns out I'm an ordinary human being with lots of bad habits.
Yeah.
Guess what? And when someone punches me in the nose, my nose bleeds. Oh, but it's just thought. Well, my nose is bleeding, so I better get a handkerchief.
Yeah.
You know, so you're sharing spirit, and that's the indigenous way of looking at life. So all that happened when I went into the indigenous way was I found a opened up portals in me that wouldn't have been opened up if I didn't go into that world. And then I went and started to talk about that in the 3P world. Not one person was interested except Sid. And so I said, well, it's a waste of time talking to these blithering idiots. That as long as they're in their field of psychology and stuff, they're the experts. That's what they wanted to be, the experts. But they didn't know anything about the indigenous world and what they experience and how they see spirit and stuff. So I simply just took that in there, put it in my bag, like you're putting your bag in, working with our group, the pursuit of truth regarding mental health, and we're putting it out. Now here's the joke: we've got this group, 6 of us, 7 of us, and we meet once a week. And now we're going to be doing about 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 talks around England and stuff like that, in mental health and so on. And I'm the lead coach, and all the others are coaching each other. So it's not a top-down type of process. But here's the joke: I've never taken a psychology course. How am I the lead coach in mental health? Well, I know a lot about mental health, but I certainly don't know the terminology and stuff like that. And so it's interesting. But that virgin mind that I talked about, mm-hmm. It consents. So it's a closed group. You notice it's not open to the public. It's a closed group of people who've had transformational experiences that will help other people to drop their beliefs around mental health and around the psychology that you were talking about. And what I saw was no one will listen to Harry Durbitsky, nobody. But people will listen to the fruit on the trees, the proof of the teachings of Harry Durbitsky. They will listen to that. Mm-hmm. And what is that? That's Salt Spring. That's all. Salt Spring was the fruit of Sydney Banks's teaching. And without the fruit, the psychologists would not have come like they did. And did he have to leave most of us behind? Yeah. But he didn't really leave us behind because it wasn't his job. It was God's job, and it was our spiritual journey. And so they took it out into the world. We never would have, and, you notice in our group, certain people take it out.
Yeah.
And certain people, they share it.
Yeah.
It's a different, and so I saw clearly that we're not talking about mental illness, obviously. We have unbelievable transformational thing, of which the only job I really have is for people to see who they are now. And that's what happened with John. I was talking to one of the members, John Stiley. I hope I'll mention him anyway. I already have, so it's too late. And he has this a very, very high way of soaring into the spiritual reality. Yeah. Very, very, very easy for him. But he says, I feel a bit like a fraud or a phony because I also have all my personal problems and my thought. And I says, you don't understand separate realities. Of course, when you're just on your own individual life, Nikki has thoughts of pain and different things that she experience. I have thoughts But that's when you all of a sudden when you step on the stage in the Zoom room or in our meetings that we have once a week, um, uh, it's a different space,
Yeah.
and it just happens. So what I'm sharing now is a space that I'm in with sharing with Nikki, a feeling. But when it stops, guess what's going to start again? My mind will come back on, and I'll be just ordinary guy with all these things. And first thing probably will be, gee, I'm hungry. I better eat something, or something like that, or oh, uh, you know, and what I'm going to do next, and it's separate realities. You
Yeah.
just so the group has a trouble accepting who they are. My job is simply to say, "Oh, come on, your story is powerful, and it helps because you're Salt Spring. You're the fruit on the tree." And people, and it's been proven already with the Carrie, coming on, people will listen to the fruit. They will not listen to the original source of the expression. And that's so Sid saw that, and they went out and they took it out. And he realized, uh, a lot of people that should, you're listening to an enlightened human being, should be just like that, eh? But obviously it isn't. Yeah. So it's an interesting journey. Helping people with addiction is being not attached to the results. Working with people in addiction is seeing it as no different than anything else in the world. It's just their God path to experience God within themselves. And when they break free of it, it's like the path of the warrior. What is addiction? It's a thought that is fear-based. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of love. Welcome to the club.
Wow, that's quite profound, Harry.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
Yeah. No, like I hadn't kind of seen it like that. Like I get the fear that I see that driving force, but fear of love, that's quite profound. So would you say fear of self-love
Well,
or
it's up.
fear of the feeling?
Well, both, all of it. It's all intermingled. It's a quantum reality where everything is intermingled with each other. It's like I wrote in my book, thought is lingering energy, because it's a tendency to think of thought, feeling,
Yeah.
but it seeps from the past and into the future. It's a continuum. So everything is interrelated. And so when you start talking about love, you're really talking about universal love of God. And then it go back to my favorite thing, because this is what I miss. What did I miss on Salt Spring? We haven't talked about that. We've talked about how great I am and how wonderful I am and all this stuff. But what did I miss that made me delay my evolvement for so many years? I I simply did not see the message that Sydney Banks was talking about. I was a fool. I experienced it, but I didn't bring myself along in the journey. I thought it was the man, not the message. And I worshiped the man. And as long as I worshiped false idols, because his message was always one thing: it's in you, Harry. It's in you, Harry. It's in you. And I go, no, yeah, I can see it's in me because I'm here with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because every time, like, you want to know what a feeling with Sid was like, it was like an escalator going. He just had so much energy. Oh, just gorgeous stuff. And what stopped me from just, because obviously I was soaring with it, and what stopped me from soaring? This is the most important thing for people to learn with addiction, with staying in truth. It's that I lost my gratitude for what I was experiencing in my life. That's what cost me. As soon as you lose your gratitude, Nikki, for what you have, you're lost. Guaranteed, guaranteed. And so I lost my gratitude. And as I lost my gratitude, my ego, my mental thinking started to be like a spider web around the experience I had. That's addiction, a spider web around the truth of love. And so that spider web, and then bit by bit, it started to, the tentacles started to evaporate. But here's the good part. While that was happening, which is the sort of a description of how you free yourself from your own thinking, your own beliefs, I was developing all these skills that were needed for when I was at 69, ready to go into the world and help and make change. And you notice that I have a lot of skills in the project that we're working in, the pursuit of truth regarding mental health. You notice that I'm not just a teacher of 3 principles. You notice papers needed to be written. I know how to get it on the computer. I have a real skill set that nobody else has in 3P. Well, that's who I am. You see, I never thought it was just this. And what am I? I'm an educator. I have known that for a long time. So when I built the three addiction, alcoholism, 3 principles YouTube channel, I built it like nobody else built it. I built it so it'd be a resource for all of time. And now I'm making podcasts from the webinars, but it's all set up. It's an educational resource.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between an educator and a counselor or a therapist? A therapist is dealing with a problem and you have to fix the problem. Educator is totally different. If you grow just a quarter of a centimeter in your understanding of how mind works, it's a success. Any upgrade in education is a success, small or big.
Yeah.
And all you're trying to do is help people understand how mind works. That's it. That's all, and how does the little mind and the big mind work together? Because Sid said distinctly in Missing Link, there's not 2 minds. There's just one mind working 2 different ways. Something like that, he said. And so if that's true, then it's hollow bones. That's a fool's crow, Indian thing of when he's healing. It's hollow bones. Right through. So that's how you live, hollow bones. When you have addiction, you've clog up the hollow bones with pollution.
Yeah.
And welcome to the club. I do it too.
Yeah.
That makes sure
you, me, and every human being on the planet,
So that's how it works. See, that's how it works. I had my fish tank here in the background. I noticed the water wasn't going down, and I put some food. It wasn't, and then I went and pulled the tube out that connects, and a bunch of poop, crap flew out, and then I put it in, and it flowed through.
Yeah, it's like that, isn't it?
That's it. So that's my job.
Yeah. I love that.
Not a big job, but it's at least a job. Yeah.
Harry, I know that you're in the process of finishing your 3rd book. Can you do you know when it's going to be out, and can you tell us just a little bit about what people?
It's a good question. First of all, it'll be out definitely within a month. It will be out, but probably 2 weeks or so. It's really at the final stages, and the refinement to get it just because if once it goes out, it's not going to change much, obviously. So it's this final stages. So it's interesting because it's called Evolution of Addiction Recovery Reopened. So I have book 2. And on it, there's 2 things I want to express. The first book is a guy is in a tunnel, on the picture of the cover, and
Yeah.
it's looking out to the opening, and it says addiction. Got it right here. Addiction. They won't see this. There is a way home.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And at that point, when I wrote this book, I was more insecure of who I am. And I want, so I was already given a lot of accolades for my work in addiction and so on, but I still felt inferior in certain ways. I needed to piggyback on the psychologist and so I brought a lot of that in, and I didn't really understand, I've never been really big on this thought thing, like everybody else is type of thing. So I piggybacked a little bit on that until, see, and then at a certain point, like you, Nikki, you get clearer and clearer and clearer. That's all I'm teaching you is all you have to do is get clearer and clearer who you are. And so that was, and I wrote it for doctors and psychologists. I paid a lot of money to an editor to get it, the English correct, because people who are educated want a really clean sentence, and and so on. And it went out and it's in treatment centers, and I've got lots of good positive feedback. And some people, say, oh, it's not just straight and narrow. It's I say, well, that's your way. I'm glad it works for you, but it's not. And so I felt really good. Now it's 2 years later, and Spirit says to me, you got to write another book. And I go, I don't want to write another book. It's a lot of work,
Yeah.
But the Spirit said that. So I said, well, I don't have anything to say. I just wrote a book 2 years ago. I don't know anything about the subject anyway. So what do I have to write another book for? But so the first thing is, it's 42 chapters. So obviously I must have found something
Yeah.
to write about. And the 42 insights. See, I learned, Sid said, I couldn't understand why people weren't understanding what I was talking about after he became enlightened. And then I realized I was sharing insights. So basically, whatever insights would come, like you mentioned, you've talked quite a bit with me about your insights, and how you get really turned on by them, and they're really beautifully expressed, and I really love them and stuff. And so the book is 42 insights. That's basically what it is, and about addiction type of thing. But so the second book is Addiction. There is a way to total freedom, and it's a totally different concept than someone stuck in the tunnel. This person is in the cover is like standing on a little piece of land, and it's a panoramic view. It's really beautiful and gorgeous, and their hands are up, and they're experiencing, what you were talking about, love, the universal love of themselves and their connection to the love of the universe. And in that process, I found my voice. You see, I'm the same as you, Nikki. I underestimated who I had become. John was the same way. The story I told you about John, he felt, well, I'm a bit of a phony, except when I talk, I just go soar like the universe type of thing. Well, obviously there's two Johns there. And so as I'm writing this story, I start, and I'm including clients, I don't need anybody else. And I deliberately keep all of that away. This is my book of what I see and what I had to see. This is who I had arrived at and become. Because the truth is, if you absorb the true message of truth as uncovered by Sydney Banks, you will live beyond your dreams. Your life will become better than your imagination of who you are. Like, I'm doing stuff far beyond what I ever expected, because of course I was a failure most of the time. And then somebody opened the dam and the floodgates happened, And I mentioned, talked to John. I said, well, when I first started, and 69 years old, I do a talk like this. Fantastic. I go, yeah, but the next one's going to stink. You know, then the next one would come, and I'd have the the trepidations and stuff, and it was fantastic. Like, yeah, but the next one, this is two. This is already two. But see, it didn't stop. And at a certain point, I stopped questioning it. And then I realized there was something different that had happened. I had gotten out of the way, and I stopped caring about me and
Yeah.
what I was creating. I didn't have to talk in an egocentric manner about me. And
Yeah.
when I didn't need compliments from people, I didn't need their opinion about how I was doing. That's very important. See, the problem with addiction is you're listening to everybody but the truth. That's addiction.
Yeah.
And everyone's got a big opinion about it. And guess what, people? That's not where the answer is. It's in you.
I know. Yeah.
If I have told Nikki 50 times, if she listens to me or follows me, I'm going to be really pissed off. I will, I will be. I will be, because I know how destructive that is, Nikki. See how you teach what you have learned the hard way? I followed Sydney Banks as an idol. He's a false idol. It wasn't him who was the false idol. It was my belief. And when I gave it up, I found out this job of teaching three principles, as you mentioned, kind of a piece of cake. What do? You get out of the way,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I think this is it, isn't it? I think, we stop being front page news, don't we?
that's it.
I
It's
just,
unimportant. It's unimportant.
yeah, yeah.
And even you can see the image that we have for pursuit of truth regarding mental health. It's I said, well, what should I call myself? Because but I but I didn't want the strength of the group is the fruit,
Yeah.
not that I'm the lead coach. People have people have heard me all over the place. When they hear the fruit, that's what will change. And the stories that people will tell stories of transformation, and
Yeah.
they'll go, me too, I can do that.
Yeah.
I
And
might not.
I'm going to be talking to two group members in a couple of weeks, and so that's going to be a wonderful episode. We're going to do an episode on mental health and speak to John and Joe, who are both in the group and have had, well, we've talked a little bit about John today, but just amazing transformations. And so, yeah, that's going to be a cool episode. But I just wanted to finish off today by first of all kind of thanking you, Harry, because I have to kind of end it now, but I could just let you carry on, sit and listen to your story. So I really could just, keep the tape running. If people are at all interested in anything that you've said, or how can they get in touch with you? How can they find you?
Well, I have a website, acttraining.biz. So that's the name of my company, and it has all the information, it has podcasts and projects, and it's got tons of stuff.
And you're
And
on
I have
Facebook, Harry, aren't you?
I am, yeah, Harry Durbitsky on Facebook. Certainly that as well. YouTube channels and podcast, lots of educational material, and
Right.
um, uh, yeah. And if you feel attracted, or you feel that maybe I can help you, certainly come in contact with me. And regarding money, it, I actually have a process now. I say, you pay me what you want, and if you
Yeah.
can't afford anything, pay me nothing. And as Nikki knows, most of the stuff I do is pro bono.
I know.
But
Yeah.
but the reality is that one client paid me an exorbitant amount of money, and I went, well, that's good actually. I kind of noticed the bank account went out.
Yeah.
and I also felt that she was showing respect for what she was getting, and she got the best of service. She got the answer to her problem. I want to end with this story. So she hired me because I spoke about the spiritual nature of the principles rather than the psychological nature, and that's what she was looking. And she had a problem with anxiety. So we did 10 sessions together. The truth was, uh, after two,
Yeah,
it was actually fine, but
yeah, yeah,
she had paid for 10 sessions,
yeah, yeah.
so she's getting 10 sessions. How many times did we talk about anxiety?
I know. I know. Probably zero, I would imagine, Harry, knowing you.
Never,
And
never,
knowing,
I never even mentioned the word.
yeah.
After the second session, I said to her, "Well, how are things going?" Because it's, a standard question.
Yeah.
And, and she said, "Well, actually, it's been a really easy week." I says, "Well, that sounds a lot better than anxiety, doesn't it?" So I did mention it
Yeah,
once,
yeah, yeah.
and that's the reality of it.
Yeah.
Because you forget about it and stuff. So I look at anxiety, I look at addiction. I'll tell you something that's 10,000 harder subject than addiction. Indigenous. Now that's complicated, but addiction, that's not a big deal. That is a big suffering, yes. But and the urge is overpowers. Yes, I understand that, but it's not a big deal. They're not in the healing process. It's obvious. It's change.
I think hearing you today is going to bring so much relief to a lot of people. So, Harry, thank you so, so much. Thank you for agreeing to come on this with me. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, and thank you, Nikki.
You're so very welcome. So, yeah, that's all for this week, everybody. And I will see you all next week. Take care. Thanks so much again, Harry. See you soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.